The station called Vera's Rest floated at the edge of nowhere, far past the last bright star that the Cathar Trade Union counted as its own. It was a small station, built to watch a quiet corner of space where nothing ever happened. That was the whole point of it. Quiet places needed watchers too, even if the watchers spent most of their years bored. Administrator Sethis Vorn had commanded Vera's Rest for 11 cycles. In that time, she had seen 3 meteor showers, 1 minor solar flare, and exactly 0 emergencies worth writing home about. She liked it that way. The Cathar were a careful people. They had built their civilization on caution, and caution had kept them alive and prosperous for 10,000 years. They did not believe in taking risks. They did not believe in heroes. They believed in checklists, backup systems, and slow, steady progress. So when the alarms went off at the 3rd hour of the night cycle, Sethis nearly fell out of her sleeping frame. "Report," she said, still pulling her uniform straight as she walked onto the command deck. Her 4 eyes blinked in different rhythms, trying to catch up with her racing mind. "Unidentified vessel, emerging from the dark lanes," said the duty officer, a young Cathar named Patil, who looked like he might be sick. "Sensors show heavy damage. Hull breaches on 6 decks. Power signature is failing fast. Survivors? Unknown. The vessel isn't Cathar, isn't Union make at all. Configuration doesn't match anything in the database." Sethis moved to the main screen. The ship on display was long and narrow, built from metal that had clearly been through fire and worse. Whole sections of the hull were torn open like paper. It drifted rather than flew, tumbling slowly end over end. "Pirates?" she asked. "No markings, no transponder we recognize. But Administrator, look at the size of it. This was a warship once." "A big one." A chime sounded. Patil's console lit up with a new signal, faint and stuttering, pushing through the static of a dying power core. "We have a distress call," Patil said. "It's automated, repeating on a loop. Play it." The voice that came through the speakers was rough, made of buzzes and clicks that the station's translator struggled to smooth into words. It took a moment before clean language emerged. "Heavy losses, hull integrity failing, requesting immediate armed assistance, coordinates attached. Any vessel receiving this signal, we need firepower, we need it now, they are still out there." The message cut off and looped back to the beginning. Sethis felt the fur along her spine rise. "Who is they? What attacked this ship?" "No way to know," Patil said. "But whatever it was, it tore through a warship like that one, was made of paper. Administrator, should we respond? Our nearest patrol cruiser is 4 days out. We don't have anything close that could fight." This was the moment Sethis had trained for her whole career, and she found she did not know what to do. Vera's Rest was not a military post. It had 2 shuttles, a handful of maintenance drones, and a security team of 6 people, whose most dangerous job so far had been chasing off scavenger insects from the food stores. Whatever had done this to a warship would swallow them whole and not notice. "Forward the distress signal," she said finally. "Send it up the chain. Let the trade union's central command decide what to do. This is above my authority." "Understood. Routing now." It should have been simple. The signal should have traveled up through the Union's communication relays, reached the fleet command at Cathar Prime, and been handed to officers with real ships and real weapons. That was how the system was supposed to work. But the Cathar communication network was old, and old networks develop strange habits. Somewhere between Vera's Rest and Cathar Prime, the signal passed through a relay station that had, 3 years earlier, been quietly repurposed. It had once handled Union military traffic. Now it handled something else entirely. It was one of a chain of listening posts that monitored a species the wider galaxy had learned, over the last 2 centuries, to leave strictly alone. The relay's automated system saw a distress call requesting armed assistance, tagged with a priority flag for maximum firepower, and did exactly what its silent, half-forgotten programming told it to do. It rerouted the message, not to Cathar Prime, not to any Union fleet at all. It sent the signal to Earth. Nobody caught the mistake. Nobody was watching that particular relay closely enough to catch it. The chain of small decisions, an old system never decommissioned, a setting never double-checked, a routing table nobody had opened in years, clicked into place like the tumblers of a lock. and the distress call of a dying alien warship went out across the dark, aimed now at the one place in the galaxy that every other civilization had learned, through hard and bloody lessons, to never, ever wake up. On Earth, the message arrived at 0347 hours, at a listening station buried under a mountain, in a country most of its own citizens could not find on a map. The station existed for exactly this purpose, to catch anything strange that came out of the dark. It rarely found anything. Space was big, and most of it was empty, and the handful of alien signals humanity had picked up over the decades had mostly turned out to be old, faint echoes of civilizations that no longer cared to talk. This was different. This was fresh. This was close. The night operator, a woman named Elena Cho, sat up straight when the alert chimed. She had worked the night shift for 6 years, and had never once seen a live signal come through with this kind of signature. Strong, clear, and tagged in a language her systems had never encountered before, but which the automated deep translation array, built from decades of half-successful attempts to crack unknown alien tongues, managed to partially decode within minutes. The words that scrolled across her screen made her blood go cold. Requesting immediate armed assistance, heavy losses, hull integrity failing. They are still out there. Coordinates followed. Real coordinates, calculated against known star positions, pointing to a location roughly 6 light-years away. Elena did not hesitate. She hit the priority line that went straight to Space Command, the line that existed for exactly one purpose, and had never once been used in her time at the station. This is Cho, Deep Listening Station 7. I have a live distress signal, non-human origin, requesting armed assistance. I am forwarding coordinates and translated content now. This is not a drill. Within 4 minutes, 3 different agencies were awake. Within 20, a secure line connected Elena's station to a conference room in a building that most people did not know existed, where tired officers in undershirts pulled on jackets and started shouting orders into phones. Humanity had made first contact before, in small ways. A handful of automated probes intercepted at the edge of the system. A few garbled signals nobody could fully translate. One memorable incident 9 years earlier, when a small scout ship had entered the outer solar system, taken one long look around, and left at maximum speed, without ever responding to a single hail. That incident, more than any other, had convinced a great many people in positions of power that something out there knew about Earth, and had decided, for reasons nobody understood, to stay far away. Now, for the first time, something was asking humanity for help. By 0600 hours, the message had reached the desk of General Marcus Webb, commander of the newly formed Terran Deep Space Fleet, a fleet that, until this morning, had existed mostly on paper and in the shipyards of 3 different countries working in uneasy cooperation, built around a single vessel that was, technically, not even finished. Webb read the translated message twice. Then he looked up at the room full of people waiting for him to say something. "Get me Admiral Reyes," he said, "and get me eyes on the Ark's status. I want to know if she can fly." Nobody in that room knew, not yet, that the distress call had been a mistake. Nobody knew that somewhere in the vast dark between the stars, an entire alien civilization was about to learn a lesson that the rest of the galaxy had already learned the hard way. That Earth, when it received a call for help, did not send committees or diplomats first. It sent a warship. 6 light-years away, aboard the drifting alien vessel, the last surviving crew member of a ship called the Vessel of Quiet Tides drifted in and out of consciousness in an emergency medical pod, unaware that her automated distress call had gone anywhere at all, let alone to the one place in known space capable of answering it, with more force than she could have imagined. Her name was Aile Corin, and she was not a soldier. She was a cartographer, assigned to a survey mission that had gone catastrophically wrong 3 days earlier, when the ship strayed too close to a stretch of space, the old star charts marked only with a warning symbol nobody on board had taken seriously enough. The thing that had attacked them had no name in any language the crew recognized. It was not a ship. It was not, as far as anyone could tell in the chaos of the attack, anything that behaved like a living creature or a machine built by hands. It moved through the dark, like a shadow given weight, and it had torn through the Vessel of Quiet Tide's shields, hull, and crew, with a patience that was almost worse than fury. Ail Corin had triggered the emergency beacon with the last working console on the ship, set it to the highest priority tag her fading systems would allow, and then lost consciousness from blood loss before she could confirm the signal had gone anywhere. She did not know that her call for help had been rerouted by a forgotten relay station into the hands of a species with a reputation the rest of the galaxy spoke of, only in warnings passed down through generations. She did not know that a warship built by that species, untested, unfinished, and commanded by people who had spent their whole lives dreaming of a moment exactly like this one, was, within hours, going to be moving toward her position at a speed that would make every other fleet in known space look like it was standing still. All she knew, in the last clear thought before the darkness took her, was that somewhere out there, if anyone had heard her at all, help was coming. She had no idea what kind of help that would turn out to be. Far behind the drifting wreck, on a world most of the galaxy had never bothered to properly survey, life continued the way it always did, unaware that anything unusual had happened at all. Earth's deep listening stations had been built, decades earlier, by a coalition of nations that had grown tired of wondering whether humanity was truly alone in the universe. The stations were expensive, mostly useless, and had for years been the subject of budget arguments in a dozen different parliaments, all of them pointing to the same simple fact. In all the years the stations had been running, they had picked up almost nothing worth the cost of keeping the lights on. That had changed 9 years earlier, when a small alien scout ship entered the outer solar system, lingered near the orbit of the outermost planet for 6 hours, and then left without ever responding to a single hail sent its way. The incident had been kept quiet from the public for nearly 2 years before details leaked, and when they finally did, the reaction across the world had been a strange mixture of wonder and dread. Something out there had looked at humanity, up close, and decided the safest thing to do was leave without saying a word. Nobody had ever explained why. The best theories, argued endlessly in classified briefings and late-night television specials alike, ranged from the mundane, perhaps it had simply been a survey mission with no interest in contact, to the unsettling, perhaps whoever built that ship had looked at Earth's history, at its wars and its weapons and its restless, endless drive to push forward no matter the cost, and decided that humanity was not a species worth introducing themselves to. Elena Cho had been a graduate student when that first scout ship appeared, still years from her post at Deep Listening Station 7, but she remembered exactly where she had been when the news broke, and she remembered the strange, cold feeling that had settled into her stomach at the thought that somewhere out there, something intelligent had already made up its mind about her entire species without ever saying hello. 9 years later, sitting in the same chair where she had first caught the distress signal, she found herself wondering if this might finally be the moment that changed things. The first real conversation, however accidental, between Earth and whoever else was out there in the dark. By mid-morning, the story had moved far beyond the walls of Space Command. Word traveled the way it always did in the modern world, in careful leaks and hurried phone calls, until by noon, 3 different news networks were running segments speculating about an unconfirmed alien signal received overnight, though none of them had anything close to the real details. Inside the secure briefing room beneath the mountain, General Webb stood in front of a room of exhausted officers and scientists, a translated transcript of the distress call projected on the wall behind him. "Here is what we know," he said. 6 days ago, a vessel of unknown origin was attacked in deep space by something powerful enough to gut a heavy warship. The survivors sent an automated distress call requesting armed assistance. That call was, for reasons we do not yet understand, routed to us instead of wherever it was actually intended to go. We are the only species who has responded. As far as we can tell, we may be the only species who even knows this happened. "General," said one of the scientists near the front, a linguist named Dr. Priya Anand, who had spent the better part of the night helping refine the translation software. "The language patterns in that message aren't primitive. Whoever sent this has a functioning trade network, a formal military structure, probably faster than light travel. This isn't a first encounter with a struggling colony. This is a message from an established interstellar civilization." "Which means," Webb said, "that somewhere out there, an entire network of species already knows humanity exists, has known for years if not longer, and has apparently decided, collectively, to stay as far away from us as possible, until this morning. The room went quiet at that. It was one thing to suspect, in the abstract, that Earth was being watched from a careful distance. It was another thing entirely to have that suspicion confirmed by an actual, functioning distress signal that implied a whole galaxy of neighbors humanity had never been properly introduced to. "So what happens now?" asked Anand. "Now," Webb said, "we decide what kind of neighbor we want to be. We can pretend this never happened, quietly log the signal, quietly ignore it, and let whoever's out there keep believing we're better left alone. Or we can answer it, and let the answer speak for itself." Nobody in the room needed to ask which option the general already favored. It was written plainly enough in the ships already being prepared in orbit, in the crew rosters already being assembled, in the quiet, determined energy that had taken hold of every person in that building since the moment the signal first came through. Admiral Elena Reyes arrived at Space Command 3 hours after being summoned from her home outside Colorado Springs, still in the process of buttoning her uniform jacket as she walked briskly through the halls toward the briefing room. She had been expecting, at most, a routine emergency, a satellite malfunction perhaps, or one of the periodic false alarms that came from cosmic background noise being misread by an overeager algorithm. She had not been expecting this. "Walk me through it again," she said, once Webb had finished the briefing, standing with her arms crossed in front of the star chart showing the wreck's coordinates. "You want to send the Ark. The Ark isn't finished. She's 8 months from her scheduled commissioning." "She's flight-worthy," Webb said. "Weapons array is functional. FTL drive has passed 3 successful trial jumps. She's not perfect, Elena, but she's what we have, and what we have is a great deal more than nothing. And if she isn't enough, if whatever attacked that alien warship is still out there, then we'll have learned something true about the size of the universe we live in, and we'll grieve, and we'll build a better ship next time." Webb's voice softened slightly. "I'm not going to pretend this isn't a risk. It is. But somewhere out there, a species we've never met is dying, alone, in the dark, and the only reason we even know about it is an accident of bad wiring in a communication relay we'll probably never even identify. If we ignore that because the timing is inconvenient, I don't think either of us is going to be able to live with what that says about us." Reyes looked at the star chart for a long moment, at the small blinking marker representing the wreck, 6 light-years from everything she had ever known. "I'll need Alvarez cleared for departure," she said finally, "and I want final say on crew selection. If we're doing this, I want people who understand exactly what they're volunteering for, not people who got pulled onto the roster because their name was next on a list." "You'll have it," Webb said. "How soon can you be ready?" Reyes thought of the ship sitting in dry dock above the Pacific, of the 200 untested systems that had never once been tried outside of controlled trials, of the 6 light-years of empty dark between Earth and whatever was waiting at the other end of that distress call. "Give me 18 hours, she said, "and General whoever sent that signal, whoever they are, wherever they actually meant to send it, they're about to find out exactly who answered instead." The ship was called the Ark of Second Chances, and she was not supposed to be ready for another 8 months. She sat in dry dock above the Pacific Ocean, a construction of dark alloy and glowing engine housings, built in orbit by 3 nations that had spent the better part of a decade arguing about funding, design, and who would get to name her, before finally agreeing on all 3 at once, out of sheer exhaustion. She was humanity's first true deep space warship, built not for exploring or for trading but for fighting, in case fighting ever became necessary. Nobody had truly expected it to become necessary this soon. Nobody had expected it to become necessary at all, if they were honest. The Ark had always been more of an insurance policy than a plan. Admiral Elena Reyes stood on the observation deck overlooking the dry dock and listened to General Webb explain for the 3rd time why they could not simply ignore the distress call. "They said armed assistance," Webb said. "Not medical aid, not rescue, armed assistance. Whoever sent that message is being hunted by something dangerous enough that a warship couldn't survive it. If we send nothing, and word ever gets out that we ignored a cry for help, that's the story that follows us across every star system for the next 100 years. And if we send the Ark and she isn't ready, Reyes asked. If half her systems fail the moment she leaves dock, then we'll have learned that the hard way instead of the easy way. But Elena, look at the numbers. Whatever attacked that ship tore through 6 decks of hull. Our sensors put the wreck at roughly the size of a heavy cruiser. Something out there is strong enough to gut a ship that size and keep hunting survivors afterward. We do not know who's asking for help. We do not know who, or what, we'd be fighting. But we know someone needs it, and we are, as of this morning, the only species in known space who has been asked. Reyes was quiet for a long moment, watching engineers in pressure suits crawl across the Ark's hull, like ants across the ribs of some sleeping giant. Who's commanding her? She asked finally. You are, Webb said, if you'll take it. Reyes had spent 26 years in service, most of them flying atmospheric craft and orbital patrol ships, dreaming the way every pilot of her generation dreamed of the day humanity would finally build something that could go out past the edge of the solar system and mean something when it got there. She had never expected that day to arrive with this little warning. I'll take it, she said. Get me a crew manifest, and get me everything we have on that wreck's last known position. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. Word moved fast once the decision was made. Within 18 hours, the Ark of Second Chances had a crew of 212, pulled from air forces, navies, and space programs across a dozen countries. People chosen not just for skill, but for the simple fact that they were ready, on short notice, to fly toward an unknown threat, with weapons that had never been tested outside of simulations. Chief Engineer Tomas Alvarez ran through the ship's systems for the 4th time that day, sweat soaking through his uniform despite the climate control. The Ark's main reactor had passed every test in dry dock, but dry dock tests and open space were different animals entirely. Talk to me, Tomas, Reyes said over the comm, standing on the bridge as the last of the boarding shuttles docked. Reactors stable, weapons array is charged and ready, but I want to be honest with you, Admiral. We've fired the main cannon exactly 11 times in testing. Real combat is going to be a different kind of stress. Understood. Shields? Holding steady. FTL drive is the real question mark. We've done 3 successful jumps in trials. We are about to attempt a jump 6 times longer than anything we've tried before. Do we have a choice? No, ma'am. Not if we want to reach those coordinates before whatever's out there finishes whatever it's doing. Reyes nodded slowly and turned to look out the forward viewport at the curve of the Earth below, blue and quiet, and utterly unaware of how much its future was about to change. Then we jump, she said. All hands, final positions. This is not a drill, and this is not a simulation. We are answering a call for help from a species we have never met, in a fight we do not fully understand, and we are going to do it the way we do everything, together, and all the way through. Signal Fleet Command. We are go for departure. Below decks, in the crew quarters that still smelled faintly of fresh paint and new machinery, Lieutenant Jonah Ferris sat on the edge of his bunk and stared at a photograph of his daughter, 4 years old, taped to the inside of his locker door. He was a weapons specialist, 29 years old, and this was his first deployment on anything that could be called a warship rather than a training vessel. You scared? Asked his bunkmate, a young pilot named Priya Nair, lacing up her boots across the narrow aisle. Terrified, Ferris admitted. We don't even know what we're flying toward. Neither did anybody who ever went anywhere that mattered, Priya said. She said it lightly, but there was something steady underneath it, the kind of steadiness that came from having already decided, long before this morning, that she was the sort of person who went toward the fire rather than away from it. Besides, somebody out there is dying because nobody came. We're going. That's the whole job. Ferris looked at the photograph one more time, then closed the locker door. Yeah, he said. That's the whole job. At 14:12 hours, ship's time, the Ark of Second Chances slipped free of her dry dock scaffolding and began her slow climb away from Earth's gravity well. Millions of people watched the launch on screens around the world, most of them only half understanding what they were seeing. A ship built for a war nobody had chosen, heading toward a fight nobody had asked for, because somewhere out in the dark, something had called for help, and humanity, for reasons that made sense to almost no one outside the crew itself, had decided that when someone called for help, you answered. On the bridge, Reyes watched the navigation display count down the seconds to jump. "FTL drive at full charge," said her navigator, a quiet man named Chen who had barely spoken since boarding, but whose hands moved across his console with total confidence. "Jump window open in 10 seconds. "Take us out," Reyes said. The arc of second chances gathered the strange folded light of her drive around her hull, and then, in a single silent instant that no camera on Earth quite managed to capture properly, she was gone, flung across 6 light-years of empty dark toward a wreck that did not yet know rescue was coming, and toward a threat that no human being had ever seen, fought, or even properly imagined. Far behind them, Earth kept spinning, unaware that the message it had answered was never meant for it at all, and that the answer it had sent back into the dark was about to change how every other species in the galaxy understood the word DeathWorlder. The first jump did not go smoothly. Halfway through the calculated transit, the Ark's navigation system threw an alert that sent Chen bolt upright in his chair, his hands flying across the console faster than Reyes had ever seen a person move. "Drift error," he said, voice tight but controlled. "We're off course. Small margin, but it's growing." "Talk to me," Reyes said, crossing the bridge to stand behind him. "FTL drive is compensating for a gravitational distortion we didn't account for in the flight plan. Could be a rogue mass, could be a stellar remnant, nobody's charted. Whatever it is, it's pulling our exit vector off target. Can you correct it?" "Working on it." Chen's fingers moved across the console, adjusting figures faster than Reyes could follow, translating raw sensor noise into something the navigation computer could use. "Recalculating exit coordinates now. This is going to put us further from the wreck site than planned, maybe half a light-year off." "Do it," Reyes said. "A rough landing in the right neighborhood beats a perfect landing in the wrong one." The ship shuddered as the drive recalculated mid-transit, an experience none of the crew had trained for and few of them enjoyed, and when the Ark finally dropped back into normal space, the bridge crew let out a collective breath that had been held for the better part of 10 minutes. "Position confirmed," Chen said, checking his readings against the star charts. "We're off by 0.4 light-years from the original target. Not ideal, but workable. I can plot a short conventional burn to close the rest of the distance in about 6 hours." "Do it," Reyes said. "And Chen, good work. That could have gone a great deal worse." "Thank you, Admiral," he said, and for the first time since boarding, allowed himself the ghost of a smile. While the ship crossed the remaining distance under conventional thrust, life aboard the Ark settled into something resembling routine, though it was a routine built on top of nerves stretched thin by uncertainty. In the mess hall, crew members not on active shift traded theories about what they might find at the wreck site, theories that ranged from cautious optimism to something considerably darker. "My money's on pirates," said a young technician named Marcus Boyle, spooning reconstituted stew into his mouth without much enthusiasm. "Somebody jumped a trade ship, took what they wanted, left the rest to die. We show up, we scare them off, we go home heroes." "And if it's not pirates?" asked Nair, sitting across from him with her own tray untouched. "You saw the sensor images of that wreck before we left. Those hull breaches weren't made by boarding parties. Something tore straight through 6 decks, like they were made of wet paper." "Then we adapt," Boyle said, though his confidence sounded a little thinner than it had a moment before. "That's what we're here for, isn't it? Whatever's out there, we're the ship built to handle it." "We're the ship built to try," Nair corrected gently. "There's a difference, and I think it matters that we remember it." Ferris, sitting a few seats down, said nothing, turning his fork over in his hands without eating. He had spent every spare hour of the journey running weapons simulations against theoretical threats, trying to prepare for an enemy he had no real data on, and the exercise had left him with more questions than confidence. "You're quiet," Nair said, glancing his way. "Just thinking about the numbers," Ferris admitted. "Whatever hit that ship did more damage in what looks like minutes than our simulations project we could survive in twice that time. I keep running the scenarios, and I keep coming up short." "Then we make sure we don't need the numbers to be perfect," Nair said. "We make sure we're smart enough and careful enough that the numbers never get tested that hard in the first place." It was, Ferris thought, a nice sentiment. He wasn't sure yet whether it was also true. In the ship's small chapel, little more than a quiet room set aside during construction after a coalition of chaplains from several faiths had insisted that any ship carrying human beings into the deep unknown ought to have somewhere for them to sit with their fears. Dr. Elisanmi found Reyes alone, staring at nothing in particular. "Permission to intrude, Admiral." "Always, Naomi." Reyes gestured to the seat beside her. "Shouldn't you be resting? Big day coming." "Same could be said of you." Elisanmi sat, folding her hands in her lap. "I keep thinking about the crew roster. 212 people, and every one of them volunteered for this within hours of hearing about it. No hesitation, no second thoughts, not that anyone showed anyway." "Does that surprise you?" "A little," Elisanmi admitted. "I keep asking myself why. We don't know who sent that call. We don't know if they'll even want our help once we arrive. We don't know what we're flying toward. And still, 212 people looked at all that uncertainty and said yes." Reyes was quiet for a moment, considering the question honestly before she answered it. "I think," she said finally, "that most people spend their whole lives wanting to matter, wanting some proof that if it came down to it, they'd be the kind of person who ran toward the fire instead of away from it. This is that proof, Naomi, for all of us. That's worth more to some people than the fear is worth holding them back. And if it goes wrong, then at least we'll have found out who we really are before the universe made us guess." Reyes managed a small, tired smile. "I'd rather know than wonder." 3 days out from Earth, deep in the space between stars where no signal from home could reach quickly, and no rescue could arrive if something went wrong, the crew of the Ark of Second Chances settled into the strange rhythm of a long voyage toward an unknown fight. Reyes spent most of those days in the officers' mess, going over what little intelligence they had. The translated distress call gave them almost nothing to work with. No description of the enemy, no numbers, no weapons profile. All they knew was that something had gutted a heavy warship and kept hunting afterward, which suggested either overwhelming firepower, overwhelming numbers, or something worse. An intelligence patient enough to finish the job properly instead of simply fleeing after the first kill. "I don't like flying blind," she admitted to Alvarez over coffee on the second night. "We don't know the enemy's weapons range. We don't know their numbers. We don't even know what species sent that call." "We'll know soon enough," Alvarez said. "For what it's worth, Admiral, the crew isn't worried about the not knowing. They're worried about getting there too late." Reyes managed a small, tired smile. "That's the right thing to be worried about." On the fourth day, sensors picked up the first hard data, a debris field, drifting at the edge of detection range, consistent with the coordinates from the original distress call. Among the debris, one signal source remained faintly active, a power core, barely alive, still broadcasting on the same automated loop that had reached Earth days earlier. "That's them," Reyes said, staring at the display. "That's the ship. Prepare for final approach." Weapons crews to ready stations. We do not know what's waiting for us out there, so we go in careful, and we go in ready for anything. The bridge crew moved with quiet, practiced efficiency, the nervous energy of the past 3 days sharpening into something colder and more focused. Somewhere ahead, in the dark, a dying alien warship and its last surviving crew member drifted, unaware that the help they had accidentally summoned was now only hours away, and that the thing that had nearly killed them might still be out there, waiting, patient as a shadow, for the rescue ship to arrive. Word of the incoming ship reached the Cathar Trade Union 6 hours before the Ark of Second Chances arrived at the wreck site, and it arrived not through any official channel, but through a frightened message from Administrator Sethis Vorn, who had spent the last 4 days watching sensor logs and slowly putting together a picture that terrified her more with every passing hour. "The signal I forwarded," she told her superiors over a shaking comm line. "It didn't reach Fleet Command. I checked the routing logs myself. It went somewhere else, somewhere off the approved network entirely." "Where?" asked Fleet Marshal Austin Vray, a broad, heavy-set Cathar with decades of service and very little patience for junior administrators wasting his time with routing errors. "I traced it as far as I could," Sethis said. "It passed through Relay Station 9 Delta before rerouting. Marshal, that station hasn't carried Union traffic in 3 years. It's part of the old monitoring chain, the one that watches." She hesitated, as if saying the words might make them more true. the one that watches the death world. The silence on the line stretched long enough that Sethis wondered if the connection had dropped. "Say that again," Bray said quietly. The distress call requesting armed assistance was rerouted to Sol System. To Earth. "Marshal, I think we may have just asked the DeathWorlders for help." There were perhaps a dozen species in known space who had ever had direct contact with Earth, and every single one of them told the same story with only small variations. Humans were fast to respond, absurdly resilient, capable of shrugging off injuries and conditions that would kill nearly anything else, and utterly, unnervingly willing to run directly toward danger that any sane species would flee. The stories had passed from species to species over 2 centuries, growing in the telling the way all such stories do, until DeathWorlder had become less a description and more a kind of prayer, the thing you said quietly to make sure you never had to deal with the reality behind the word. Nobody in living Cathar memory had ever deliberately summoned one. "Get me everything we have on human military capability," Vray said, "and get me a channel to every Allied fleet within 3 sectors of that wreck site. If humans are moving a warship through that region, I want every civilian vessel clear of the area before." "Marshal," Sethis interrupted, checking a new alert on her console. "It's too late for that. Long-range sensors just picked up an FTL exit signature at the coordinates. Marshal, it's already there." The arc of second chances dropped out of FTL, exactly 400 kilometers from the wreck of the vessel of quiet tides, her sensors sweeping the debris field within seconds of arrival. "I'm reading 1 active life sign," said the ship's medical officer, Dr. Naomi Elisanmi, hunched over her console. "Located in what looks like an emergency medical pod, decks aft. She's alive, Admiral, but barely." "Threats?" Reyes asked. "Nothing on sensors," said the tactical officer. "No active weapons signatures, no engine heat, no life signs beyond the one in the pod. Whatever attacked this ship, it isn't showing up on anything we've got." Reyes did not relax. If anything, the absence of a visible threat made her more cautious, not less. "Send the shuttle. Full escort. Ferris, Nair, you're on the away team. Get that survivor and get out. Do not linger." The shuttle crossed the gap between the 2 ships in 11 minutes, and Ferris found himself standing for the first time in his life, inside the wreckage of a genuine alien vessel. Corridors built at proportions slightly wrong for a human body, emergency lighting in colors Earth engineers had never used, and everywhere, the scorched, torn evidence of whatever had torn through the ship like it was nothing. "Whatever did this," Ferris said quietly into his comm, "didn't just hit the hull. Look at these cuts. Clean edges. This wasn't an explosion. Something did this on purpose, deck by deck." "Copy that," Reyes said from the bridge. "Get the survivor and move." They found Aile Corin in her medical pod, unconscious, her 4-fingered hands curled against her chest, her skin a pale gray blue that Dr. Ilasanmi's medical scanner struggled to read against any human baseline. She was alive, but only just. "We need to move her now," Ilasanmi said, already working to stabilize the pod for transport. "Whatever her biology is, she's dying slowly. I can buy her time, but I need a real medical bay." They carried her back to the shuttle with the careful urgency of people who understood, without needing to say it aloud, that they were carrying the only surviving evidence of whatever had happened out here, and possibly the only person alive who could tell them what they were about to be fighting. Aile Corin woke 2 days later in a bed that was not her own, in a room lit by a soft white light unlike anything on her ship, surrounded by machines whose purpose she could only guess at, and by a face that was, to her eyes, deeply, unsettlingly strange, smooth-skinned, 2-eyed, built along proportions that her mind kept trying and failing to fit into any category she recognized. "Easy," said Dr. Ilasanmi, raising both hands slowly in what she hoped was a universal gesture of calm. "You're safe. You're on a human ship. My name is Naomi. You were injured. We found you." It took nearly an hour, working through a translation program built hastily from the fragments of her own distress call, before real communication became possible. When it did, Aile Corin's first question was not about her injuries, or her ship, or even the crew she had lost. "Human," she said carefully, testing the word. "You are the DeathWorlders." Ilasanmi hesitated. That's one thing we've been called, yes. I did not call for you, Aelcorin said, and there was no accusation in it, only a kind of stunned disbelief. My message was meant for Union Fleet Command. I do not understand how it reached you. We don't fully understand that either, Ilasami admitted. But you called for help, and we came. That's really all that mattered to us. Aelcorin was quiet for a long moment, studying the strange, soft-skinned creature in front of her, trying to reconcile the careful, gentle voice with 2 centuries of warnings passed down through every species she had ever known. You should not have come, she said finally. Not here. Not to this place. Why not? Because whatever attacked my ship is not a raider, and it is not a rival fleet. It is something that hunts in that stretch of space, something the old charts warn against, and nobody has ever properly identified. Ships that go missing there simply go missing. My crew and I only survived as long as we did because we ran. She looked past Alisanmi, toward the reinforced hull of the medical bay, as if she could see straight through it to the dark beyond. You flew a single ship into a graveyard, DeathWorlder. I fear you do not yet understand what that means. On the bridge, Reyes received the translated report in silence, standing very still while she absorbed it. So we don't know what we're dealing with, she said finally. Not a species, not a fleet, something local, something that's been killing ships in this region for years. That's the shape of it, said her tactical officer. Long-range sensors have been running continuous sweeps since we arrived. Nothing so far, but if this thing operates the way the survivor describes, patient, deliberate, hunting ship by ship, it may simply be waiting for the right moment. Reyes looked out at the dark beyond the viewport, at the drifting wreck of the vessel of quiet tides still tumbling slowly against the stars, and felt the particular, focused calm that came, for her, only in moments when the danger was real, and the choice in front of her was simple, even if the consequences were not. Then we don't wait for it to choose the moment, she said. Alvarez, bring the reactor to full output, tactical. I want every sensor array we have running active scans, not passive. If something out here has been hunting ships for years because nobody ever fought back, it's about to meet the first ship in this graveyard's history that isn't planning on running. Understood, Admiral, came the reply, bringing us to full readiness. Reyes allowed herself one more look at the wreck outside the viewport, proof of exactly how badly this could go, and then turned back to her crew. Let's go find out what's really out here, she said, and let's make sure it regrets ever showing itself. Word of the human ship's arrival did not stay contained to the Cathar trade union for long. Within a day, a garbled and heavily exaggerated version of events had already begun spreading through trade networks that connected a dozen different species across 3 sectors, each retelling adding new and increasingly improbable details. On a crowded trading platform orbiting a gas giant 3 systems away, a Voss merchant named Ethril Ban heard the story secondhand from a Cathar freight captain who swore he'd gotten it from someone at Fleet Command itself. A single ship, the captain said, voice hushed with the particular excitement of someone enjoying a good rumor, regardless of its accuracy. One DeathWorlder ship sailed straight into the graveyard sector without so much as an escort. They say it happened by accident. Some kind of routing error sent a distress call meant for us straight to their homeworld instead. And they came anyway? Yithril asked, mandibles clicking in disbelief. Nobody sane goes looking for whatever's out there. That's exactly it, the captain said. DeathWorlders aren't sane. Not by our measure, anyway. My cousin works comms relay out near the border, and she says the whole sector's gone quiet waiting to hear what happens. Every fleet captain within a week's travel has changed course to stay well clear, just in case whatever's coming next spills outward. Yithril considered this for a long moment, turning it over the way a good merchant turns over any piece of information, looking for its value. If they succeed, she said slowly, if a single DeathWorlder ship actually does something about that graveyard after 200 years of ships simply vanishing there, that changes the value of every trade route within 5 sectors. Insurance premiums alone would fall by 1/3. Assuming they survive to tell anyone about it, the captain said. There is always that small complication, Yithril agreed. Still, I find myself hoping for their success rather more than I expected to, given everything I've ever heard about their kind. It was, in its own small way, the first ripple of something that would eventually become much larger, the sound of a galaxy's opinion beginning, cautiously, to shift. Aboard the Ark, in the hours before the confrontation with whatever lurked in the dark, Fleet Marshal Austin Vray's formal inquiry finally reached Reyes through a relay chain that had taken most of a day to establish, translated into passable English by systems the Union had, until recently, never needed to build. "Admiral Reyes," the message began, stiff and formal in the way of a species unused to addressing the DeathWorlders directly. "The Cathar Trade Union wishes to convey both its gratitude for your response to a signal that was never intended for your people, and its deep concern for the safety of your vessel and crew. The region you now occupy has claimed numerous ships over 2 centuries of recorded history. We urge caution. We also, should you require it, offer whatever assistance the Union is capable of providing from a safe distance, though we confess we do not know what such assistance might usefully consist of." Reyes read the message twice, noting both the careful courtesy and the obvious, underlying anxiety running beneath every line. "Draft a response," she told her communications officer. "Tell them we appreciate the warning, we intend to proceed with caution, and will share everything we learn out here, regardless of how this ends." "Tell them," she paused, considering her words carefully, aware that whatever she said next would likely be the first real impression an entire alien civilization formed of her species firsthand. "Tell them we didn't come out here because we were asked correctly. We came because someone needed help, and that was reason enough." Aelcorin spent much of that final day before the battle in quiet conversation with Dr. Ilisanmi, the translation software growing steadily more fluent with every exchange as it learned the particular rhythms of her language. "Your ship," Aelcorin said, gesturing at the reinforced walls of the medical bay. "It does not feel like a warship. Union military vessels are built cold, efficient. Every space serves a single purpose. This place," she gestured again, taking in the soft lighting, the small personal touches crew members had added to their quarters, the framed photographs some had brought from home. "This feels like somewhere people actually live." "I suppose it is," Ilisanmi said. "We didn't know how long we'd be out here when we built her. Felt wrong to build a ship that felt like a coffin, even if it might end up being one." "That is either very brave or very strange," Aelcorin said. "Perhaps both." "Probably both," Ilisanmi agreed, smiling. "Can I ask you something? About your people, I mean. What made your ship come out this far in the first place? The wreck, before the attack. It wasn't a warship originally, was it?" "No," Aelcorin said, something heavy settling into her voice. "The vessel of quiet tides was a survey ship, cartography. We were charting trade lanes for expansion, nothing more. I have spent my whole career making maps, Doctor. I have never held a weapon in my life. I do not know how to fight. I only know how to run, and even that I did poorly enough that most of my crew did not survive to try." Ilisanmi reached out, carefully, and rested a hand against the alien woman's arm in a gesture she hoped translated across species the way she meant it. "You survived," she said. "That's not poorly done. That's the whole job some days. Just staying alive long enough for someone to come." Aelcorin looked down at the unfamiliar hand resting against her arm, 5 strange fingers against her own 4, and for the first time since waking aboard the Ark, allowed herself something that might, in a human, have been the beginning of real trust. "Then I hope," she said quietly, "that your people are as good at the rest of it as they are at coming when called." It took 11 hours of active scanning before the Ark of Second Chances found anything at all, and when the discovery finally came, it came not from the sensor arrays but from Aelcorin herself, sitting in the ship's observation lounge under careful watch, staring out at the dark with the particular stillness of someone who had learned, the hard way, to trust her instincts about that stretch of space. "There," she said suddenly, pointing toward a patch of darkness that looked, to human eyes, exactly like every other patch of darkness around it. "It moves like that. A shifting in the stars. Nothing more. It was there before my ship was attacked too. I dismissed it as nothing. I will not make that mistake twice." The crew member escorting her relayed the observation to the bridge immediately, and Reyes ordered a full sensor sweep of the indicated coordinates using every wavelength the arc carried. For nearly a minute, nothing came back. Then the readings arrived, and the bridge went very quiet. "Admiral," said the tactical officer, "I'm reading a mass out there. Big one. It's not reflecting light in any normal way, which is why visual sensors keep losing it, but gravitic scans are picking up something roughly 4 times our size, holding position half a light second from our location. Weapon signature? Unknown. It's not powered like anything in our database. No engine heat, no reactor signature, nothing that reads as a conventional power source at all. Admiral, whatever that thing is, it isn't built like a ship." Reyes stared at the tactical display, at the faint, shifting outline the sensors had finally managed to isolate. Vast, dark, and utterly still, watching them from half a light second away, with a patience that felt, even through layers of screens and instruments, deeply and deliberately wrong. "Options," she said. "We could retreat," Alvarez offered from his engineering station. "FTL drive is charged. We could jump out before it closes the distance. And leave it here to keep hunting anyone else who wanders through," Reyes said. It wasn't really a question. No. We came out here to answer a call for help, and there's still a species out there that doesn't know what's hunting in this region. If we run now, the next ship that gets that same distress signal routed wrong won't be as lucky as we've been so far. Tactical. Status on weapons. Main cannon charged and ready. Point defense arrays online. Shields at full capacity. Then let's introduce ourselves properly, Reyes said. Bring us to combat readiness. All hands. This is not a drill. We have located the entity responsible for the attack on the alien vessel we rescued, and we are going to engage it before it can threaten anyone else. Helm, close to optimal weapons range, but keep us maneuverable. I do not want us pinned down. The crew had already, without any official designation, started calling it the Shadow, did not move as the arc of second chances closed the distance. It simply waited, vast and dark and silent, until the human warship was well within range of whatever senses it possessed. Then, without warning, it attacked. There was no visible weapon discharge, no beam of energy, no missile launch that any sensor could track. One moment the arc was closing steadily through open space. The next, alarms tore through every deck as the outer hull along the port side buckled under an impact that defied every damage model the ship's computers had ever run. "Hull breach! Decks 4 through 7, Alvarez shouted over the chaos. "Admiral, whatever hit us, it wasn't a beam, and it wasn't a projectile. Damage pattern looks almost like something physically tore through the plating. Shields? Down to 60% and falling. It's hitting us faster than they can regenerate." On the tactical display, the Shadow's outline flickered and shifted, closing the distance to the arc with a speed that made no sense for something its size, moving less like a vessel under thrust, and more like something simply choosing to no longer be in one place, and instead be in another. "Fire the main cannon," Reyes ordered. "Full charge, direct hit." The arc's primary weapon, tested only 11 times before this moment, fired a bolt of concentrated energy that lit up the surrounding dark like a small sun. It struck the Shadow directly, and for one brief, hopeful second, the vast dark shape seemed to shudder and pull inward, as if genuinely hurt. Then it kept coming. "It's not stopping," the tactical officer called out. "Admiral, that hit should have crippled anything in our database, and it barely slowed down." Reyes felt the ship shudder again as a second impact tore through the outer hull, closer to the bridge this time, close enough that she felt it in her own bones as much as heard it through the deck. "Casualty reports coming in from decks 5 and 6, Alvarez said, his voice tight. "We have wounded. I don't have numbers yet." Reyes forced herself to think past the sound of alarms, past the rising panic she could feel building in her own chest, and focused instead on the one thing that mattered. This thing had killed a warship before. It had killed the vessel of quiet tides, and it clearly intended to do the same here. But it had also, for one brief instant, flinched when the main cannon struck it. Flinching meant it could be hurt. Hurt meant it could be killed. "Concentrate fire on the same point of impact," she ordered. "Tactical. Target the exact coordinates of our first hit. Alvarez, I need everything the reactor can give the weapons array. Right now. Admiral, if I push the reactor that hard, we risk. I know what we risk. Do it anyway. The Ark's point defense arrays and secondary weapons opened up alongside the main cannon, pouring concentrated fire into the same point on the Shadow's vast dark form, again and again, even as the creature's counterattacks continued to tear through the ship's hull deck by deck. The bridge lights flickered as power surged toward the weapon systems. Somewhere below, Ferris and his weapons crew worked in near darkness, hands moving on pure muscle memory as they kept the arrays firing through damage reports that would have made any sane person stop and reconsider. I'm reading a change in its structure, the tactical officer called out, disbelief cutting through the exhaustion in his voice. Admiral, it's pulling back. It's actually pulling back. Don't let up, Reyes said. Everything we've got, now, while it's hurting. The Shadow's vast form contracted, folding in on itself in a way that no human sensor could properly describe, and for one long, terrible moment, the entire crew of the Ark of Second Chances held its breath, uncertain whether they were witnessing a retreat or the gathering of something far worse. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the Shadow was gone, not destroyed, not visibly, but simply no longer present on any sensor the ship carried, vanished back into whatever dark and hidden place it called home. The bridge went silent except for the ongoing wail of damage alarms and the ragged breathing of 200 people who had just survived something none of them fully understood. Status, Reyes said, her voice hoarse. Hull breaches on 5 decks, Alvarez reported. Shields at 12%. Reactor is stable but stressed. We have... He paused, checking the latest update from medical. 11 wounded. 2 critical. No fatalities, Admiral. We got everyone out in time. Reyes closed her eyes for one brief second, letting relief move through her before she pushed it aside to focus on what came next. Get Dr. Alessandri everything she needs. Alvarez, I want a full damage assessment, and I want to know if we can safely make the jump home. And somebody get me a El Corin. I want to know if that thing is coming back. In the observation lounge, Ale Corin had watched the entire battle through the reinforced viewport, and when the crew member finally came to escort her to the bridge, she was still staring out at the space where the Shadow had vanished. Her expression, as much as a human could read alien expressions, somewhere between disbelief and something that might, in a human, have been called awe. You heard it, she said quietly, before anyone could ask her anything. In all the years, ships have vanished in this region. In every warning ever written into the old charts, nothing has ever hurt that thing. It has always simply won, or the ship it attacked has simply run. You did neither. We got lucky, Reyes said when the report reached her, though even as she said it, she wasn't sure she believed it herself. Perhaps, Ale Corin said, or perhaps the stories my people tell about DeathWorlders were never exaggerations at all. Reyes looked out at the dark beyond the viewport, at the scarred and damaged hull of her ship, and thought of the 212 people who had just fought something out of legend and survived to tell the story. Get us ready to make for home, she said finally. We answered the call we were sent to answer. Now let's go tell the rest of the galaxy what we found out here. The hours immediately after the battle were, in many ways, harder on the crew than the battle itself. In the makeshift overflow medical bay set up in the officers' mess, Dr. Alessandri and her small team worked through the night, treating the 11 wounded, 2 of whom remained critical for the better part of 2 days. Ferris, who had escaped the fighting with nothing worse than a badly bruised shoulder from being thrown against a console during the second impact, spent most of that first night sitting outside the medical bay doors with Nair, both of them too wired from adrenaline to sleep. I keep replaying it, Ferris admitted, staring at his hands. The moment it hit us the first time, I thought that was it. I thought we were finished before we even got a shot off. But we didn't finish, Nair said. That's the part you should be replaying instead. I know, I'm trying. He rubbed at his bruised shoulder absently. I've run 100 simulations of first contact scenarios in training. None of them looked anything like that. None of them prepared me for how it actually feels when something that size decides to try and kill you. Nothing could have prepared you for that, Nair said. Nothing prepares anyone for that. You do the job anyway. That's what today proved. Not that we weren't scared, but that we did it scared, And we're all still here to talk about it. Down the corridor, Alvarez moved between damage reports with the particular grim focus of an engineer who understood, better than almost anyone else aboard, exactly how close the ship had come to catastrophic failure. The reactor had run at 140% of its rated output for nearly 6 minutes straight during the final exchange of fire, a stress level the design engineers back on Earth had explicitly warned against ever attempting outside of controlled testing. "We got lucky," he told Reyes during the debrief, exhaustion plain in every line of his face. "Reactor containment held, but barely. If that fight had gone another 2 minutes, I honestly don't know what would have happened. We were operating so far past safe parameters that the automated shutdown systems should have kicked in and taken the weapons offline. They didn't, and I still don't have a clean answer for why not." "Would you do it again?" Reyes asked. "Push the reactor that hard, knowing what we know now?" Alvarez considered the question seriously before answering. "Given the alternative," he said, "yes, without hesitation. But Admiral, we need to build the next one better. If this is going to be a regular part of the job, we can't keep surviving on luck and stressed out engineering. We need margins. Real ones." "Agreed," Reyes said. "Write it up. Everything. Every system that ran hotter than it should have. Every failure we avoided by inches instead of by design. I want the next ship built knowing exactly what this one taught us." On the second day after the battle, with the Ark's most critical repairs underway, and the ship stable enough to consider the journey home, Aelcorin asked to see the sensor logs of the engagement, and Reyes, after a moment's consideration, granted the request without hesitation. The alien cartographer watched the recorded footage in silence, her 4 eyes tracking the shifting dark shape of the creature as it closed on the Ark, as the ship's weapons opened fire, as the vast form finally flinched and pulled back under sustained assault. "In 200 years," she said finally, "no ship has ever made it flinch. Do you understand what that means? Every warning ever written about this sector assumed the thing could not be hurt. Every captain who ever ran, instead of fighting, believed, correctly as far as anyone knew, that fighting was a death sentence." "Maybe it was for the ships that tried it before," Reyes said. "We don't actually know that we could have beaten it in a longer fight. It retreated. That's not the same as being destroyed." "No," Aelcorin agreed, "but it is the first time in living memory that it chose to retreat rather than finish what it started. That distinction will matter a great deal to every crew who has to fly through this sector after you." She turned from the screen to look at Reyes directly. "You said, when we first spoke, that you did not come here to be thanked. I believed you then. I believe you more now, having watched this. But I hope you will allow my people to thank you regardless. It matters to us, even if it does not matter to you." "It matters to us too," Reyes said. "More than you might think. We've spent a long time out here not knowing if anyone else was watching, or what they thought of us if they were. Having someone actually say thank you, that matters more than you'd guess." Word of the engagement reached Earth 6 days after the battle, transmitted in a compressed data burst the moment the Ark came back within range of the Deep Listening Network. Elena Cho, back on shift at Deep Listening Station 7, was the one who decoded the incoming transmission, and she felt her hands shake slightly as she read through the summary Reyes had attached to the full sensor logs. "Engagement successful. Hostile entity driven off, not destroyed. 11 wounded, no fatalities. Survivor recovered and stable. Full data package attached for scientific and defense review. Recommend immediate diplomatic outreach protocols be drafted. We are no longer alone out here, and it appears we have not been for some time." Elena sat back in her chair, staring at the message, thinking of the 9 years since that first silent scout ship had come and gone without a word. 9 years of wondering what the rest of the galaxy thought of humanity, if it thought of humanity at all. Now, 6 light years away, an alien survivor was recovering in a human medical bay, and an alien fleet marshal was drafting the first formal diplomatic contact her species had ever received. She picked up the priority line and made the call that would wake up half of Space Command for the second time in 2 weeks. "This is Cho, Deep Listening Station 7, she said, and found she was smiling despite the hour. "The Ark is coming home, and she's bringing a guest." News of what had happened in the graveyard sector spread through the Cathar trade union within a day, and from there it moved outward through every allied network, every trade route, every quiet channel that connected one species to another, across the vast dark of known space, growing and shifting with each retelling, the way all great stories do. Fleet Marshal Asen Vray received the full report 3 days after the battle, delivered in person by Administrator Sethis Vorn, who had personally traveled to Cathar Prime to make sure the story was told accurately, rather than through the increasingly wild rumors already spreading across the trade routes. "They found it," Sethis said, standing in Vray's office with a data slate in her hands. "The thing that's been killing ships in that sector for as long as anyone can remember. The humans found it, engaged it directly, and drove it off. Marshal, nobody has ever done that, not once, in 200 years of ships going missing out there." Vray took the data slate and read through the sensor logs the Ark of Second Chances had transmitted, logs that had been shared freely, without hesitation, without any of the careful political maneuvering that usually accompanied such information between species who did not fully trust one another. "They're sharing everything," he said, sounding almost as surprised by that as by the battle itself. "Full sensor data, weapon effectiveness, everything they learned about this creature, freely given, no conditions attached. They said," Sethis checked her notes, "that if something is killing ships in that region, every species deserves to know how to survive it." "Marshal, I spoke with the human captain myself, Admiral Reyes. She didn't ask for anything in return. She didn't even seem to think there was anything unusual about sharing it." Frey sat back in his chair, turning the data slate over in his hands, thinking of 2 centuries of quiet, careful policy built entirely around the idea of staying as far from humanity as possible. "We owe them something," he said finally. "A debt like this does not simply vanish because it's inconvenient to admit. Draft a formal message to Earth's government. Not through back channels this time, through the front door. It's time the Union stopped pretending we don't know they exist." The Ark of Second Chances limped home 8 days after the battle, her hull scarred, but her crew intact, and the reception that greeted her when she finally settled back into her dry dock above the Pacific was unlike anything her crew had expected. It was not, at first, a hero's welcome. Space Command was too busy processing what had actually happened: an unplanned first contact, a battle against an unknown entity, a rescued alien survivor now recovering in a secure medical facility, to organize anything as simple as a celebration. But word moved fast, the way it always does, and by the time Reyes stepped off the shuttle onto Earth's surface for the first time in nearly 2 weeks, a crowd had already gathered outside the base perimeter, drawn by news reports that had been running in a continuous loop since the Ark's return signal first reached home. "Admiral Reyes," called a reporter from behind the barrier, "is it true you engaged an unknown alien entity in direct combat? Is it true there are other civilizations out there who already knew about us? What happens next? Are we at war?" Reyes stopped, considered the crowd, the cameras, the sheer weight of a moment she had never trained for, and then answered the only way she knew how to answer. "We're not at war," she said. "We answered a call for help. It turned out to be more complicated than we expected, but that's usually how it goes. We found something dangerous out there. We did what we could to stop it from hurting anyone else, and we brought home everything we learned so it might help someone in the future." She paused, glancing back at the scarred hull of the ship behind her. "As for what happens next, I think that's largely up to whoever reaches out to us next. We'll be ready to answer, same as we were this time." Ail Corin remained on Earth for 6 weeks, recovering fully under the care of Dr. Ilasanmi's medical team, and in that time she became, without either side quite planning it, something like a bridge between 2 worlds that had never properly spoken to one another before. She met with scientists, with diplomats, with ordinary curious people who simply wanted to see, with their own eyes, that the stories were true, that somewhere out there, other minds existed, thinking and feeling and afraid of dying just as humans were. "Your people frightened mine for 200 years, she told Reyes during one of their last conversations before the Cathar Union finally sent a proper diplomatic vessel to bring her home. "Every story I ever heard about DeathWorlders was meant as a warning. Stay away. Do not provoke them. Do not draw their attention." "And now?" Reyes asked. Now I think perhaps we told the story wrong, A.L. Corin said. Not because the stories were false. You are exactly as strong, and exactly as fearless, as every warning claimed. But nobody ever told us what you did with that strength. Nobody told us you would fly into a graveyard for a stranger's voice on a distress signal, expecting nothing in return. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. I think, Admiral, that my people were afraid of the wrong thing. We were so busy fearing what you could do, that we never stopped to ask what you would choose to do. That was our mistake, not yours. Reyes thought about that for a long moment, about the accident of routing and old forgotten relay stations that had brought a dying alien's call for help to Earth instead of to her own people, about how easily that same signal could have gone unanswered, or answered too late, or answered by someone with less patience and less care than the crew she had commanded out into the dark. Mistakes have a way of turning into something good sometimes, she said. I'm glad this one did. In the months that followed, the story of the arc of second chances spread across known space, in the particular way that only true stories can, told and retold by traders, diplomats, and ordinary travelers who had no direct stake in it, beyond the simple pleasure of a good tale well told. The Cathar Trade Union formally opened diplomatic relations with Earth within the year, the first of what would eventually become a dozen different species reaching out, cautiously at first, and then with growing confidence, to a species they had spent 2 centuries deliberately avoiding. The old warnings did not disappear entirely. Caution, once built into a culture over centuries, does not vanish overnight, and there remained plenty of species across known space who still preferred to keep their distance from a species capable of what the Ark had done in that graveyard sector. But alongside the old warnings, a new kind of story began to spread as well. Not a warning to stay away, but something closer to reassurance. That if you were ever truly in trouble, truly out of options, truly calling out into the dark with nothing left to lose, there was, somewhere out there, a species that would come. Not because it was owed anything, not because it expected anything in return, simply because a call for help had reached them, and answering it was, as far as they were concerned, the whole point. Administrator Sethis Vorn kept her post at Vera's Rest for many more years after that night, and she made certain, personally, that every relay station under her watch was checked, rechecked, and properly maintained from that point forward. But she never disabled the strange, quiet backup routing that had once, through nothing but chance and old forgotten wiring, sent a dying woman's cry for help to exactly the place capable of answering it. You never know, she told her successor, many years later, when the younger officer asked why an old, unused system remained active on the network. Sometimes the mistake is the whole point. Sometimes the wrong number is exactly the right one. And far above Earth, in the dry dock where she had first been built, the Ark of Second Chances sat gleaming under fresh repairs, her scarred hull now a permanent part of her design rather than something to be hidden, a reminder to every crew who served aboard her afterward of the night a mistaken distress call had gone out into the dark, and humanity, without hesitation, without a moment's doubt, had simply and quietly answered. 2 years later, the Cathar Trade Union commissioned a formal survey mission to properly chart the graveyard sector for the first time in 2 centuries, escorted not by their own fleet, but by a joint task force that included, for the first time in Union history, a human vessel flying alongside Cathar ships, as an equal partner, rather than a distant, feared unknown. Fleet Marshal Vray, older now and slower to move than he had once been, insisted on being present when the survey fleet departed, standing on the observation deck of Cathar Prime's main shipyard, alongside Sethis Vorn, who had been promoted twice since the night she first forwarded a distress call to the wrong address, and changed the shape of the galaxy without ever meaning to. Strange, isn't it? Vray said, watching the human escort ship take its place in formation alongside the survey vessels, that all of this began with a mistake, a relay station nobody remembered to decommission. If that system had simply been shut down on schedule, the way it should have been, none of this would have happened. A.L. Corin would likely have died out there. We would still believe that sector unsurvivable. And the DeathWorlders. We would still call them that, and mean it only as a warning, Sethis finished. I have thought about that a great deal, Marshal. About how much of what matters in a life, in a whole civilization's history, comes down to accidents nobody intended and nobody controlled. Do you regret it? Vray asked. The mistake, I mean. If you could go back and fix that relay before the message ever went astray, would you? Sethis considered the question seriously, watching the survey fleet's engines flare to life against the dark. No, she said finally. I think, Marshal, that some mistakes turn out to be the only door that was ever actually going to open. We simply didn't know it was a door until something walked through it. Ail Corin, now serving as the Union's first official liaison to Earth, stood aboard the human escort ship as it took up its position in the survey formation, watching through the viewport as the graveyard sector's dark, empty stretch of space came into view on the tactical display. The same stretch of space that had nearly killed her, that had taught an entire galaxy something true about the species it had spent 2 centuries avoiding. Admiral Reyes, promoted now to oversee all of Earth's expanding deep space operations but unable to resist joining this particular mission personally, found her standing there and came to stand beside her. Second thoughts? Reyes asked. Nobody would blame you for staying home this time. No, Ail Corin said. I find I want to see it properly this time. Not as something fled from, but as something understood. She glanced sideways at Reyes. Do you know, in all this time, I have never properly thanked you. Not for the rescue itself, for what came after, for choosing to share everything you learned instead of holding it as an advantage. My people are not accustomed to being treated that way by anyone, let alone by a species we spent 200 years telling our children to fear. You don't need to thank me, Reyes said. You already did, a long time ago, just by trusting us enough to let us try. Ail Corin was quiet for a moment, watching the dark drift by outside the viewport. There is an old saying among cartographers, she said eventually. A map is only ever a record of where fear used to be. Every blank space, every warning symbol, every place marked unsurvivable. Someone decided that boundary long before we were born, and we simply inherited their fear along with their charts. She gestured toward the display, toward the sector that had haunted her people's maps for 2 centuries. I think this time, we are finally drawing a different kind of line. The survey fleet moved forward together into the dark human and Cathar ships, flying in formation for the first time in either species' history, charting a stretch of space that had once been nothing but a warning, and was becoming, slowly and carefully, something else entirely. Proof that even the oldest fears could be redrawn, given the right accident, the right signal sent to the wrong address, and the right crew willing to answer a call that was never meant for them in the first place. Behind them, growing fainter with every passing hour, Earth spun on as it always had, one small blue world among countless others, no longer quite so alone in the dark as it had once believed itself to be.